The king, it appears, had made known certain wishes, for an Egyptian scribe assures him, all shall be accomplished as thou hast said. They related to the felling of cedars in the wooded mountain region of Lebanon for the building of a new Nile ship to be used in the service of Yemen, and for the fabrication of those tall masts which adorned the front of the temple gate towers. In the lively representation still preserved, the Canaanites are seen employing and felling the highest and straightest trees. With this, the deeds of Seti in the east had reached their conclusion. He had smitten the wandering peoples on, and struck to the ground the agricultural peoples, Mete, and had placed his boundaries at the beginning of the world, and at the utmost borders of the riverland of Naharain, which the great sea encircles. His return took the form of a specially festive triumphal procession, laden with booty, spoils of war, from the land of Ruthen, with silver and gold, with blue, green, red, and other precious stones, accompanied by numerous captives from lands which he had again subjected to the supremacy of Egypt. Seta reached his home by the same road which had led him from Egypt into the foreign countries. At the frontier near Ketam, the priests and great men of the land waited to meet him with gifts of flowers. The priests, the great ones, and the most distinguished men of the south and north Egypt have arrived to praise the divine benefactor on his return from the land of Ruthen, accompanied by an immensely rich spoils, such as never had happened since the time of the sun entity Ra. They speak thus in praise of the king and in glorification of his fame. Thou hast returned home from the foreign countries which thou hast overcome. Thou hast triumphed over thine enemies which are subjected to thee. May the duration of thy life as king be as long as the sun in heaven. Thou hast quenched thy wrath upon the 9 foreign nations. The sun entity Ra, I guess it doesn't say Ra, but himself has established thy boundaries. His land protected thee. When thy battle axe was raised above the heads of all peoples, whose kings fell under thy sword. Then comes a list of the conquered nations, of which the following are those generally mentioned on the monuments. 1. Keta, the land of Keta. 2. Naharain, the riverland, Mesopotamia. 3. Upper Ruthen, Canaan. 4. Lower Ruthen, northern Syria. 5. Singar, the city and land of Singara, the Siniar of Holy Scripture. 6. Una, an unknown island or coastland. 7. Kadesh, in the land of the Amorites. 8. Pabek. 9. Katnath. Both names, I guess, are going to be defined more later. 10. Asebe, the land of Cyprus. 11. Manas, the city and land of Malas. 12. Agupta, the land of Cappadocia. 13. Balnu, Balanea, to the north of Aratus. To these may be added the Canaanitish cities mentioned on the temple of Abydos, Sithagal, Zor, or Tyre, Inuam, or Jamnia, Pahir, Hill, or Galilee, maybe, Hali, in the tribe of Ashur, Betha Anta, or Beth Anath, in what afterwards was Yehuda, Kartha Anbu, or Kir Aneb, also a place in Yehuda of later times. That the wars of the king did not take place only in the first year of his reign is evident from several inscriptions, as, for example, the record in the temple of Radicea, built in the 9th year of Ptah reign, which cities the following names of the people who had been conquered: 1. Sangar, i.e., Sangara; 2. Kadeshu; 3. Makita, i.e., Megiddo; 4. Ha; 5. The Shasu Arabs of Edom; 6. Asal or Asar, a name we can hardly venture to identify with Assur. Ptah-mer-Satin carried his wars to the west, and in particular against the Libyan tribes, who now appear for the first time on Egyptian monuments. The double plume on the crown of the head and the side locks of hair mark in the most striking manner these races which the inscriptions designate by the name of Tahe, Tuhen, or Tuheni. The light are fair people. To this campaign, Ptah-mer-Satin took his son and heir Ra-Muswu. In the battle itself, the king appears in a chariot. His pair of horses bore the name Victorious is Yemen. An inscription says, he, the king, utterly destroyed them when he stood on the field of battle. They could not hold their bows and remained hidden in their caves like foxes through fear of the king. Of course, after these extensive campaigns, Yemen and its temple at Apt would be remembered, as is proved by the following record. The king presents the spoils to his father Yemen on his return from the miserable land of Ruthin, consisting of silver, gold, blue, green, red, and other precious stones, and of the kings of the peoples whom he holds bound in his hand, to fill therewith the storehouse of his father Yemen, on account of the victory which he has granted to the king. The kings of the peoples which had not known Egypt are brought by Pharaoh in consequence of his victory over the miserable land of Ruthin. They speak thus to glorify his majesty and praise his great deeds. Hail to thee, mighty is thy name, glorious thy renown. The people may well rejoice, which is subjected to thy will. But he appears in fetters who oversteps thy boundaries. By thy name we did not know Egypt. Our fathers had not entered it. Grant us freedom out of thy hand. The prisoners are presented by the divine benefactor to his father Yemen from the hostile kings of the nations which had not known Egypt. Their gifts rest on his shoulders to fill therewith all the storehouses as men servants and maid servants. Now, out of their land to the prisoners, there's some missing part here. In consequence of the victories which the entity has given the king over all lands, and some more missing from the inscription here. The great kings of the miserable land of Ruthin are brought by the king in consequence of his victory over the people of the Keta, to fill with them the storehouse of his noble father Yemen Ra, the lord of Thebes, because he has given him victory over the southern world and the subjugation of the northern world. The kings of the nations speak thus to praise Pharaoh and exalt his glory. Hail to thee, king of Kemet. Is that how you say it? Son of the 9 peoples, exalted be thou like those that we consider to be gods. The people saying this. I'm not saying that all these things are gods or something, but principles you can refer to at the very least. From the above inscription, it is clear that Ptah-mer-Satin the first, Seti the first, must have proved his entire devotion to the Theban priests, or to speak in the official tone of the Egyptians, to the Theban Yemen. His buildings, wonderfully beautiful creations of unknown masters of his time bespeak the efforts of the pharaoh to express his gratitude for the distinguished position which the priest had allowed him. His rich presents complete the proof of his regard for the temple at Apt. His especial reason for this lay in the peculiar position of Ptah Satin with regard to the great question of the hereditary right to the throne. The monument's name as the wife of the king, or rather as the mother of the great son and successor Ra must Swu Sinui. The second. What is Ramses the second? What is his name? Ra Usur Ma'at Snoopin. Kind of word there. The Queen Twe, whose name at once reminds us of the family of Yetunux Ra Kun. In genealogical succession, she was a granddaughter of that heretical king whom the Theban priest had so bitterly excommunicated, although he belonged to the legitimate race of kings. But however hateful this connection might be to the priest, yet it was in accordance with the law of the hereditary succession. The remembrance of her grandmother's origin must have been all the more distasteful to the priests as King Ptah Satin and his race worshipped the foreign entities in the most obtrusive manner. Head of them all, the Canaanitish Baal Sutux, or Set, after whose name his father Ra must Swu, the first, had called him Ptah Satin. Well, the follower of Set. Thus, he had to avoid an open breach and thought as a conqueror, Ptah Satin had done his part for Egypt. He was bound to try and win over the priest as a benefactor and a generous king. Yet he seems to have had but little success, since at an early period he conferred the highest dignity of the empire on his infant heir, Ra Matsu, and made him associated king. In the great historical inscription at Abydos, Ra Matsu, the second, relates that the Lord of all himself nourished me and brought me up, and I was a little boy before I attained the lordship. Then he gave over to me the land. I was yet in my mother's womb when the Great One saluted me full of veneration. I was solemnly inducted as the eldest son into the dignity of heir of the throne of the chair of the earth entity Seb. I have gave my orders as chief of the bodyguard and of the chariot fighters. Then my father presented me publicly to the people. I was a boy on his lap, and he spoke thus: I will have him crowned as king, for I desire to behold his grandeur while I am still yet alive. Then came forward the officials of the court to place the double crown on my head. And my father spake, placed the regal circlet on his brow. Thus he spoke of me while he still remained on earth. May he restore order to the land. May he set up again what has fallen into decay. May he care for the inhabitants. Thus spake he, with good intention, in his very great love for me. Still after he left me in the house of the women and of the royal concubines, after the manner of the damsels of the place, he chose me, women, from among the maidens, who wore a harness of leather. In another inscription of the times of Ra Masu, the second, the early reign of the king is mentioned in the following words: Thou wast a lord, Adon, of this land, and thou actedst wisely when thou wast still in the egg. In thy childhood, what thou saidst took place for the welfare of the land. When thou wast a boy, with the youth's locks of hair, no monument saw the light without thy command. No business was done without thy knowledge. Thou wast raised to be a governor, brother, of this land, and thou wast a youth, and countedst 10 full years. All buildings proceeded from thy hands, and the laying of their foundation stones was performed. When Ramses II ascended the throne, he may have been about 12 years old, or a little more. From this epoch, we should count the years of his reign up to its 67th year, so that he was an old man of 80 when he died. After Ka-Mer-Sittin had assured the birthright of his race in the manner we have described by the elevation of his eldest son to the throne, it must have been easy for him to meet the reproach that he was not of royal descent, while he actually ruled the land as king. Excuse me for the burp. Ra Masas Swu, his son, as legitimate sovereign, gave authority to all the acts of his father. It seems to have been under their double reign that those wars took place which were waged against the nations to the south of Egypt. When Ka-Mer-Sittin, in the list of conquered peoples on the wall of Karnak, mentions the countries of Kush and Punt, with all the great and small races of the southern lands of Africa as the subjects of his crown, we must not forget that the ancient usage was followed of exhibiting to the Egyptians the more or less detail of the whole catalog of those peoples transcribed from the temple books of the subjects of Egypt. Several records of this time bear witness to campaigns beyond the frontier towns of Sian. The Egyptian viceroys, known as kings' sons of Cush, acted as governors in the place of Pharaoh in the south and took care that the tributes imposed were regularly paid. As such are mentioned in the joint reign of Ta-Mer-Sittin and Ra-Masu, the second. Seti the first and Ramses the second. Ani and Manapa, a son of Power. The reign of Ta-Mer-Sittin belongs to that period in the history of the country during which the Egyptian art enjoyed the peculiar favor of the king and answered to his patronage in the most worthy manner by creation of real masterpieces. The Hall of Columns at Karnak, insofar as it was carried out during the king's life, and the Temple of Yusir at Abydos are works of highest order, the splendor of which consists above all else in the beauty of the sculpture, even to the hieroglyphic characters. The celebrated tomb also of Seta is one of the most remarkable achievements of Theban art. It is the one called after the name of its discoverer, Belzani's tomb, and to this day forms the chief point of attraction to visitors to the Valley of the Tombs and the Kings at Thebes. It contains an abundance of pictures and inscriptions which are chiefly mythological, but which also involve special significance in relation to astronomy, as do the very instructive roof pictures of the so-called Golden Chamber. Unique in its kind is the mythological substance of a long text found in a side chamber of the same tomb in width, as M. Naville has proved, has for the subject of a description of the destruction of the corrupt human race. As Ta-Mer-Sittin had erected one of the most splendid works to the entity Yemen on the right bank of the Theban metropolis, so also at his command there rose on the western bank of the river that wonderful temple which he dedicated to the memory of his deceased father, Ra-Masas Swu, the first. The Memnonium of Ta-Mer-Sittin of Old Gurna, and many places on this monument which belonged to the West Country and consequently to the realm of Yusir, Osiris. The king avoids giving himself the name of Ta-Mer-Sittin. He calls himself generally Ere or Usere Sete. I don't think that's the right pronunciation, but we're going to leave that there. The sanctuary bore the designation of the splendid temple building of King Meneptah Seti in the city of Yemen on the western side of Thebes, frequently also with the addition in site of Apt. The temple was dedicated to his deceased father, to the entities of the dead, Yasir and Hatar. Besides Yemen and his company, the death of Sete took place while the temple was in course of building. We are told by the inscription, which, they don't make this easy. We have Bra, Usur, Ma'at, Snoopin, put up King, Ra, Usur, Mat, Snoopin, executed this work as his monument to his father Yemen Ra, the king of the entities, the lord of heaven, the ruler of Thebes. As he finished the house, his father King Meneptah, Seti, before he died, and entered the realm of heaven and united himself with the sun entity in heaven. When this, his house, was being built, the gate showed a vacant space, and all the walls of stone and brick were yet to be raised. All the work in it, of writing or painting, was unfinished. Mer Satine dedicated, a special document to the memory of his royal ancestors in the temple of Abydos, namely the celebrated tablet of the kings called that of Abydos, containing the names of 76 kings up to the founder of the empire, Mena. In Memphis and Heliopolis, Mer Satine, first, raised temples or added new parts of temples already existing, which are likewise designated as splendid buildings. Although their last remnants have disappeared without leaving a trace, their former existence is most surely proved by the testimony of inscriptions. In the same way, we know that at the foot of the mountain behind the old town of El-Kab, he erected a temple to the female entity, Nekab, and another in the form of a rock grotto to Hatar in her lioness form. Among the sculptors of the time, the name of a certain He has been preserved among the painters of Yemen Uwasu. Yemen Uwasu, is that how you say it? Is expressly celebrated as the first painter. Both worked by the king's order in the decoration of the tomb, which was destined for Ba'war, the reigning governor of Thebes, the son of the chief priest of Yemen, Neb-Netru, surnamed Thera, and of the oldest among the sacred priestesses of the entity Bur Yemen Ra, and also for her brother Tatao. And so the abundant tributes and taxes which under Jahota Nefer Qasper must. Oh, what was the third's name? Okay. The fourth? No, that's the fourth. But wasn't the third for Cuspermus? Ksa'a, Jahota, Nefer, Cusper, Musis. Okay. That's the. Oh, no, that's the second. Jahota, Nefer, Cusper, Musis. It's the third. Okay. Okay, I got that right the first time. Were yearly contributed by conquered nations and his own subjects, seen from the reign of Ptah-mer Satin, to have flowed less vigorously when the wants of the kings were the same, and the erection of costly buildings required a great expenditure. New sources must needs therefore be opened for the requisite means, so the king began to devote special care to the regular working of the gold mines in Egypt and Nubia. and to the formation of wells in the midst of the parched mountain regions, from which the gold was to be won. One of these was the desert on the eastern side of the Nile opposite to Edfu, which at this day bears the name of Rhodesia and contains the remnants of an old rock temple. It marks the site of one of the resting places on the road which led straight through the desert from the town of Koptos on the Nile to the harbor of Bernice on the Red Sea. The inscriptions on the temple date from the time of Ptah-mer-Satin, Seti the First. They not only established the existence of gold ore in the interior of the mountain, but also the position of a well, hydriuma, as the Greeks called it, made by royal command, and relate how, in the 9th year of Ptah-mer-Satin, in the month Epiphet, on the 20th day, that king undertook a journey to see the gold mines which existed there. After he had gone many miles, he halted to consider the information he had received, that the want of water made the road almost impassable, and that the travelers died of thirst in the hot season of the year. At a suitable place, a well was bored, and a small temple built there to the name King Ptah-mer-Satin. Thereupon, everything was done to carry on the gold washing with success. The people who followed this laborious occupation were placed under the supervision of a herpet, or overseer of the foreign peoples, and measures were taken to ensure the keeping up of the temple and the worship of its entities, Yasur, Yust, Sa, and Her, Osiris, Isis, Horus, which kind of relate to the whole IHS thing, but that's for another place. Besides the three chief entities of the country, Yemen and Hormuzku of Thebes and Ptah of Memphis, the inhabitants were highly pleased for this work, for King Ptah-mer-Satin did this for his memorial for his father Yemen-Ra and his company of entities. Namely, he built anew for them a house of God, that in the interior of which the entities dwell in full contentment. He had the well bored for them. Such a thing was never done before any king except him, the king. Thus did King Ptah-mer-Satin do a good work, the beneficent dispenser of water, who prolongs life to his people, for he is for everyone a father and a mother. They speak from mouth to mouth. Yemen grant him a long existence, increase to him an everlasting duration, ye entities of the well. Assure to him your length of life, since he has made for us the road to travel upon, and has opened what lay shut up before our face. Now can we travel up with ease and reach the goal and remain living. The difficult road lies open there before us, and the way has become good. Now the gold can be carried up, as the King and Lord has seen. All the living generations and those which shall be hereafter will pray from eternal remembrance for him. May he celebrate the 30 years in Jubilee feast like Tamu. May he flourish like her of Apollinopolis, because he has founded a memorial in the land of the entities, because he has bored for water in the mountains. In the execution of the work, Geneh, the king's son of Cush, as well as commander-in-chief of the Maza'eh, was present as the directing architect. The fact is attested by rock inscriptions accompanied by pictorial representations, as, for example, that of the warlike foreign entity considered to be a goddess, Entha, who rides on horseback, wielding a battle axe and shield like Balana. Whether, after all, the mines yielded rich produce, and the gold washers delivered to the reckoner of the silver and gold of the land of the country of Upper and Lower Egypt, He-Shera, the results of the laborious employment in satisfactory quantity, we do not know, for upon this point the monuments are silent, as Ptah Mer Satin rain rain runs parallel with that of the sun. Ra must Swu, we will suppose, Ramses the first, we will suppose with the ancients that his soul suddenly flew away like a bird to the Egyptian heaven to enjoy a better existence in the bark of the sun. Now the fat parts in the north, this is the temple of Ptah Mer Satin, and how do you say Ramses? Ramses the second is not an easy. Not keep forgetting Ramses the second. How do you say Rams? Ra Usur Ma'at Nupen. That's R Ra Masu. But this is their temple with the fat part in the north, and parts that weren't excavated at the time. But isn't this one of those temples that there's part that actually goes back like 10,000 years before they initially thought? Sherma, peace be upon you.